We'll call to order the regular adjourned meeting of the Winnebago County Board for Thursday, May 26, 2016. Agenda changes, public participation, and John Tack Brantley, and a presentation also Coroner Sue Fiducia. And then under Operations Administrative Committee, item H, Director of Purchasing, posting request for IT is to be removed. Clerk, call the roll.
Boomer. Fiducia. Gurl. Present. Gorel. Present. Guevara. Present. Hoffman. Present. Jury. Present. Kelly. Here. Lyon. McDonald. Present. Nicolosi. Here. Red. Salgado. Here. Schultz. Here. Sweeney. Here. Tassoni. Present. Webster. Here. Westcott. Present. Wilson. Biondo. 17 present, 3 absent.
We do have a quorum. Indication pledges allegiance, Board Member Eli Nicolosi. All please stand.
Thank you. Please bow your head. Dear God, first let me say thank you on behalf of all of us who are gathered here today. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself, for the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance, and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Thanks as well for the freedom to embrace you or the freedom to reject you. Thank you for loving us even so, for your boundless and gracious nature. Also on this Memorial Day, we pray for those who courageously laid down their lives for the cause of freedom. May the example of their sacrifice inspire in us the selfless love of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Bless the families of our fallen troops and fill their homes and their lives with your strength and peace. We pray this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Okay, Mr. Brantley, you have 3 minutes. Second time this year. One more and that's it, buddy.
You know, a closed mouth don't get fed. So you got to be persistent and continuous showing up in order to get anything. But I want to start out by God give me the grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, courage to change the things which should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from the other and know the difference. This past weekend, this one lady wrote in the newspaper and also was on the internet stating, every week you can spot John Tack Brantley somewhere in Rockford. Just look for the man with about 100 kids. He is always taking the kids somewhere and giving them experience that they do not receive at home or in their neighborhood. Just want to say, we see you, and some of you could take notes from him. He keeps these young ones in line. This past Saturday was a good day. One of our aldermen put in over $50 in gas in the Mount Zion church van, and we also had RHA band and 3 carloads of youth and adults at both events, Swedish American Hospital, South Safety Fair, plus Hope Fellowship Church, that's across the street from East State Street, Burger King. The church had plenty of food and was glad to see us. We would like to thank all our sponsors that helped make this day happen. There was over 50 of us all together. We are still working on trying to get us a minibus or a van so that we can take more of our at-risk youth and adults out of the hood and to different events in the Rockford and the surrounding area. What I come here today is to ask, how can we work together to engage working with our youth, and how can the Winnebago County Board work with me and help sponsoring our at-risk youth? I'm looking at spearheading the Mount Zion Church and the Salvation Army, facilitating running programs through there, doing some 5 days out the week. That young lady that just got killed this past week, she was one of the youth that was up under my program. The young man that got killed that was 24 years old, his niece and nephew was involved in my program. I'm getting sick and tired of being sick and tired of seeing losing so many of our young people, and we sit around and talk about it and do nothing about it. It's time that we take action. It's time that we work together. This is bigger than me. This is not about me. And as the chairman just said, you're only giving me 2 weeks or only 1 week. I'll be coming back every other week to bring to y'all what I'm doing. If you don't see me on the news, you see me in the newspaper, but this is not about me. This is about us working together to lower the crime, and the only way we're going to lower the crime is about bringing and building preventative programs to the need in education, training, and jobs for our at-risk youth and for our young adults. Thank you for your time, and I'll be back, like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I love you too. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We're going to entertain you at a committee here. I think Mr. Fiducia and Mr. Westcott jointly type thing. We've got some other requests for programs specifically in the youth area, so you could certainly bring your request forward at that point. Okay? Our coroner, Sue Fiducia.
Good evening. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come before you today to try to explain some things that are be given to you as county board members that I believe are wrong or not all the information you need to make an informed decision regarding elected officials' salaries for the next 4 years. In a recent newspaper article, a county board member said that elected officials were paid, or pay was pretty high. But he didn't state that there are 78 other county employees who make much more than elected officials do, plus they get raises every year, plus a longevity bonus, which elected officials do not receive. Again, and not all the 78 employees are department heads. Department heads have received a 3 to a 4.5 pay raise in 2016. I would like to quote Gary Jury from an article in the newspaper. He stated, "I will not give any pay raise until we get our pocketbook in order." He failed to state that all other employees, both bargaining and non-bargaining, have already received raises this year. They received at least 2%, and others have received a much higher pay increase because plus their longevity bonus. It appears that Gary Jury is trying to blame the county's shortfall on elected officials. It is my understanding that the calculations for the 5 elected officials getting a 2% pay raise amounts to $16,000. I have not been able to get a dollar amount on the raises or longevity bonus for bargaining and non-bargaining employees for 2016, but it has to be more than the $16,000. I have asked several county board members, including Gary Jury, how they can justify denying 5 elected officials from getting a raise when they hand out such large raises to every other county employee. I firmly believe that this is discrimination. Gary Jury has also stated to me that he knew how he could get things back in order. So why will it take 4 years of a wage freeze for elected officials and still bargaining and non-bargaining employees will continue to receive a raise? Last year I received 3/4 of 1% raise. A department head that has been employed by the county for less than 8 years received a 4% pay raise and is making $24,000 more than any of the elected officials. I take this as a huge slap in the face, and you as county board members did not believe that I or other elected officials were worth more. A county board member also stated that there's no accountability for elected officials. I beg to differ with you, as we are held accountable to citizens that continue to elect us. In conclusion, I'm asking you to vote no on the 4-year wage freeze and to amend the resolution to give the 5 elected officials a 2% pay raise for each of the next 4 years. Thank you very much.
Please have a motion to approve the minutes from, yes, we have a question? Yes, Mr. Gray, I'm sorry.
I'd like to answer
Yes,
her
go right
accusations.
ahead. Go ahead, yes.
First of all, when she uses my name and says other county board members, I wish she would have done that. Number one, we gave other people raises, yes, long before we found out the financial situation that we're in. And you have to start somewhere. I'm going to stick by my guns. I'm going to do exactly like I said. I will vote no for pay raises for any elected official. Thank you.
Okay, may I please have a motion to approve the minutes from April 28th, 16, and lay over the minutes from May 12th, 16. Moved by Mr. Hoffman, second by Mr. Boomer, Mr. Nicolosi, Mrs. Goral, and Mr. Salgado. Additions, corrections, deletions, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. Announcements and communications, Clerk Mullins.
The items listed below were received as correspondence.
They'll be placed on file. Other announcements and communications. I do want to announce one committee call by the chair here. I've asked Mr. Nicolosi relative to IT and communications in general. The chair, a committee again called by the chair. We've talked about this since we reorganized, and I've also asked Mr. Guevara and Mr. Girl to serve on that as well. And any other communications? Okay. May I please have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Mr. Guevara, seconded by, need a second here, Mr. Hoffman. Discussion? Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, the clerk will cast a yes vote for all members present. Consent agenda is approved. Standing committee reports, Finance, Mr. Biondo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee report, I'd like to move for the approval of resolution authorizing settlement of a claim against the County of Winnebago entitled Amanda Bouchard versus Winnebago County. It's for $13,500 in a nursing home accident, and I so move.
Heard the motion, seconded by Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Nicolosi, Mr. Boomer, and Mr. Drury. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Resolution's approved. Mr. Biondo.
Thank you. I'd like to also move for a resolution authorizing execution of a proposal for recruitment and selection of Winnebago County Finance Director with GovHR USA. It's to actually proceed to interview and hire a person, and the total cost is $17,000.
Okay, you heard the motion approved, seconded by Mr. Kelly. Discussion. Yes, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because items C and D were just brought in at a 5:15 meeting tonight, I'm going to make a motion to lay items C and D over to the following meeting.
Okay. Okay, you heard the motion. Pardon?
Both of them?
Both of them, well, really, we've just got C in front of us at this point, so. If that's your motion to lay over C, Mr. Schultz? And that's seconded by Mrs. Goral. Discussion on the layover?
Yes. I understand that, the sooner that we get this person in, the better it'll be, because Brian Cutler, who is currently working with the administration to do this, we have the budget coming up, that we're going to be doing before October, and also we need to have someone get up to speed on the various graphs and tables that Mr. Cutler does for us, which has been very helpful in looking at budgets for the various departments. And I would vote again. I'm going to vote no on this.
Mr. Drury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I respect Mr. Schultz's amendment, but unfortunately, I will not support it. I don't think that this is going to make a difference one way or another who we hire, so I will not be supporting that amendment, or on item C also.
Mr. Nicolosi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe our next board meeting is June 9th. Between now and then, are there any major financial decisions, can anyone answer this, Or obviously, we want the time on our side, but is there anything major that would preclude us from pushing this over?
Well, we're right in the middle of the budget right now. We need this quick. It's going to take at least 2 months to do, so there is a problem, and we, of course, apologize for the urgency,
Sure.
but we did get bids, and we do need to move forward. So, Mrs.
Thank you.
Doral.
I understand the urgency, but I also know that many of these things you have several days before our board meeting, and it sure would be nice that it came out to us so that we can review it, even if it's not on the, that's coming up on the agenda, so that many of us have an opportunity. We all have a life, we work, and so at the last minute, when you get this at 4:30 on the day of our meeting, there's no way we can go through all of this and read it. And that's where I have a problem. We need to have time to look at it. And even if we had it the week before, when we have, like last week, if you had it, we should have had it, so we could have discussed it even at our caucuses. We go to caucus and don't get anything, or any information, and then all of a sudden, they're sitting on our agenda, and we need to approve it that night. I have a hard time with it, and that's one reason I second Steve's motion.
Mr. Webster.
Yeah, I have to agree with Angie and with Steve as well. Your committee meeting was just 15 minutes ago to bring this forward, and that is really not quite the norm. Thank you.
Mr. Guevara.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a unique circumstance, and there are unique circumstances in which the board has in the past acted in a short period of time to pass something. A number of zoning issues, different financial issues we've done on same day. This sounds like an urgent matter, and I think maybe that, I'm going to be a no on the layover.
Could I make?
Mr. Kelly.
I'm in agreement about being frustrated with these last-minute resolutions, but besides that, the resolution, the way it came out in the email this afternoon, is inconsistent. In one point, it says a price not to exceed $17,000, and the paragraph below, it says not to exceed $167,000.
Yes. I had discussed that with Steve Chapman, and it actually is, we can amend it to 17, it's supposed to be 17,000.
Yeah.
I saw that also, just reading it there.
Mr. Chapman.
That was just a typo there.
Yeah.
Mr. Biondo.
Yes, on a very complicated matter, I would tend to agree with Mr. Schultz and Ms. Goral too, but this one is, we are definitely going to lose Mr. Cutler to auditing department, and we know it's going to cost us $17,000 to hire someone else. That's all this is. It's a recruitment tool, $17,000 to this company to look for a person to replace him. That's all it is. So I'm still going to vote no against the layover. Do we even get to vote on layover?
Yes, further discussion. Clerk will call the roll. This is on the layover.
Badusha? Yes. Gurl? Goral? Yes. Guevara? No. Hoffman? No. Jury? No. Kelly? Yes. McDonald? Yes. Nicolosi? No. Salgado? No. Schultz? Yes. Sweeney? No. Tassoni? Webster? Yes. Westcott? No. Biondo?
No.
Boomer? 7 yes, 10 no, 3 absent.
Okay. So the main motion is before you. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Clerk will call the roll.
Gurl? Yes. Goral? Excuse me, Guevara? Yes. Hoffman? Yes. Jury? Yes. Kelly? No. McDonald? Yes. Nicolosi? Yes. Salgado? Yes. Schultz? No. Sweeney? Yes. Tassoni? Yes. Webster? Westcott? Yes. Biondo?
Yes.
Boomer? Fiducia? 11 yes, 6 no, 3 absent.
Resolution's approved. Mr. Biondo?
All right, thank you. And then I'd like to also move for a resolution authorizing an early retirement option for county employees.
You've heard the motion, seconded by Mr. Jerry. Discussion, Mr. Schultz?
Yes, as requested, I'd like to make a motion to lay over this item.
Heard the motion, is there a second? Mr. Hoffman? Okay. On the layover, discussion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution, the layover is approved, I should say, so the resolution D will lay over. Mr. Biondo?
Okay, that concludes our finance report.
Okay.
But I'm up here for the other.
Oh, now we have tax cycle, yes. Mr. Wilson is gone, so Mr. Biondo.
All right,
Tax cycle.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have one issue for the Tax Cycle Committee. It's a resolution authorizing the allocation of $12,000 to the Fair Appraisal Assurance Fund. And that's a fund that is being set up by school districts and other taxing districts to make sure that we are represented at the state's property tax assessment boards, and that we have an equal chance to stop some of the assessments from being lowered, in one case from $11 million to $4 million. And that would cost the overall, all the taxing districts about $4 million, and Winnebago County in particular, $400,000, just for that one property. So this will allow us to have people that will go down and put appraisal there right along next side of the big companies where they put their appraisal down. So it's being done by most of the taxing districts in our area, and I move to approve this resolution.
You heard the motion, second by Mrs. Gurl. Mr. Gurl, any discussion? Mr. Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, is this roughly equal to the percentage that we share of the tax revenue?
Yes, the school district will be paying over half of the cost, because that's how much they are the tax. We're 7.5 or so, or 8, something like that. That's our percentage.
Further discussion? Mrs. Gurl?
Mr. Biondo, how many school districts will that affect?
I think it's 12, isn't it?
We've invited them all. We've had meetings here to ask everybody to participate.
Just to understand, it's not one school district.
You're right.
All school
You're right.
districts.
No, Mr. Walsh is doing a good job with this, putting it together, but we'll have the supervisor of assessment, the township assessor, and then 3 representatives from taxing district in each township. So that could be a different school district each time. Obviously, the majority of it's in Rockford, but right now, up north in the North Point, it's really, really a focus, because it's 4, pushing 5 years, it's $4 million, as you indicated, Mr. Biondo, so.
Yeah, that was a very good point, Ms. Garl. Yeah. Sure.
Well, any assessment that's bogus is going to affect any other township, so it's really critical. And of course, now they don't come here, the Property Tax Appeal Board, we have to go to Springfield, so we're going to pay those expenses. So thanks again, State of Illinois. Further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is approved. Mr. Biondo?
That concludes our report. Thank you.
Zoning Committee, Mr. Webster?
Thank you. Zoning Committee has sort of a cornucopia for you this evening. We have a resolution, we have a map amendment, we have a special use, and an ordinance. So starting with the resolution, it's authorizing the chairman of the county board to execute an intergovernmental cooperation agreement for building inspection for the village of Durand. This came to the zoning committee with unanimous approval for recommendation. So I would move to approve.
You heard the motion, seconded by Mr. Kelly, Mr. Guevara, Mr. Westcott, Mrs. Goro, who did I say? Mr. Salgado? Anyone else? Did I miss a second? Yes, Mr. Boomer. Okay. Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Resolution's approved. Mr. Webster?
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Z0716, that's a map amendment to rezone plus minus from Ag to Ag A2. That came also with unanimous approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals and unanimous approval also from the Zoning Committee. So that's in for a first reading, but
So ordered.
if there are no objections, I would move to suspend on that.
Is there anything else you're going to suspend on this evening?
Yes, sir.
Well, could we read them all in the record?
SU 0116, special use permit to allow a mobile home to be replaced with another mobile home. It's an ag priority district as well. Once again, that came through with unanimous approval from both Zoning Board of Appeals and Zoning Committee. And that's in for first reading, but I would move to suspend on both of
Okay,
those.
so that's the conclusion of your agenda for suspending the rules, those two items?
Those two items, yes, sir.
Okay, so is there any objection to considering those? Mrs. Goro?
On the second one, it's with conditions.
Thank you, Angie. That's with conditions.
Okay, so any objections to considering both with one motion? And Mr. Webster's motion is to suspend the rules?
My motion to
To
suspend the
consider
rules.
both? and that's
Consider both, and the special use permit comes with conditions.
Seconded by Mr. Drury, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Sweeney, Mrs. Goro, Mr. Salgado. Any objections to suspending the rules? Hearing none, the clerk will cast a yes vote for all members present. Rules are suspended, and a motion is in order. Mr. Webster,
I would move to approve.
both, please read them into the record, so.
Z0716 and SU 0116 with conditions.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Kelly, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Guevara, Mr. Sweeney, Mrs. Goro, Mr. Salgado. Discussion? Mr. Drury? You gotta get to a mic, Mr. Drury, on the record.
What district is a mobile home in?
Roslyn County Road 8.
Thank you. I didn't get a chance.
Okay. All right, any objections to the motion? Hearing none, the clerk will cast a yes vote for all members present, and both items are approved. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. Finally, we have an ordinance, this is in for the layover, and that's to adopt a 2015 edition of the International Property Maintenance Codes and to remedy other minor issues. This came in from the forward list from the Health Department. Thank you.
Okay, and that'll lay over.
That's for layover, yes.
You're good? Thanks.
Thanks.
Now, we're operations and administrative report, Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Operation Administrative Committee has several resolutions before you this evening. However, I'd like to make a quick statement in regards to sending out notices. We have several resolutions that we had a meeting on Tuesday, and if you all read your email, I requested Mr. Chapman to send you all of the necessary information so you could read it and decipher your decision. So it wasn't a quick decision like some of it had to make today. All right. Your first resolution is fixing compensation and other benefits for certain elected officials, elected county officials, and I move for its adoption.
Motion. Second by Mr. Guevara. Discussion. Mr. Bianco?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make an amendment on the floor to approve a county auditor. I still agree with all the freeze part of this. I would just like to reallocate basically $5,480 from the chairman's position for next year and put that in for the county auditor and the county recorder for $84,024, and everybody would be frozen for the 4 years. So it has no effect whatsoever to the taxpayers. But it keeps these people from my information, that they wouldn't have a raise basically for 8 or 12 years, 8 or 9 years. And I actually talked to both of them and to one other person, and this, I just think it's fair. It still keeps the freeze for the 4 years, but it reallocates $5,400 to these two individuals and puts them up with the treasurer and a county clerk.
Heard the motion, seconded by Mr. Gurl. Discussion on the amendment.
Chairman,
Mr. Joey?
where are you going to get the money to do this? You're switching it from what to what?
Use your mic, please, Mr.
From the county chairman's position, which was $95,658 down to $90,178, and the other ones would go from $81,284 to $84,024. It's a wash. There's no change of money whatsoever. It just reallocates $5,480.
Well, Mr. Bando, I can't support that. If you're taking money from the chairman, we might as well say next year, let's take money for new county board members. It's not feasible for me. And if you're going to do that, and if it passes, I will make a motion that it goes back into the general fund because of the financial situation we're in. Moving money around, no, it's got to go back to the general fund. Thank you.
Mrs. Burrow?
I have to agree with Mr. Biondo. We have people who are coming in who have never even had any county experience, and yet we're going to give them top dollar that our person, like the chairman's been for 30 years to reach where he's getting. And I do feel that what Ted is suggesting is very fair, and then there will be a freeze. I'm sorry, Gary, that you feel that that you have to control it all. There's other good ideas out here, too, that need to be looked at and questioned and discussed, and I think Mr. Biondo has come up with a very fair solution.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Hoffman? Mr. Hoffman?
First of all, Angie, I don't want to control anything. That's why we have 20 people out here. You stated your thing, I stated mine.
Okay,
So
we'll be back.
I don't like that. Thank you.
Look at that. Mr. Hoffman?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have a problem with either one, but just to go along with what Angie's saying, if we're going to follow the logic of people that haven't been involved, then we should cut all the salaries of the newly elected people. And I'm all for that.
Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be a little redundant. I've already said what I've said, but I just feel compelled to say it again. Basically, I think this whole conversation is kind of silly, to be honest with you, both sides of this current debate, because we talk about fairness and we talk about whatever. Personally, for the record, when tax revenues dropped, we should have been harder on our bargaining position and our collective bargaining units. So we do 1, 2, 3, and then we do a bunch of non-bargaining people. That's like 1,500 people. So we basically have the elephant through the gate, and now the tail is left. So people that are talking about basic fairness and things like that, this whole situation is not fairness. Ultimately, what it is trying to use 5 people for political gamesmanship or whatnot, and that is unfortunate. I mean, we should have had tougher bargaining stances to save money overall, but it's not right to let 1,500 people go into a situation and then hold 5 people back for whatever the reasons are like that, because this is politics, fine, whatever, but I mean, I just want to remind people, for instance, the total, if we had been fair with these 5 people, which would have been, the 2% for the other non-bargaining people, is $16,000. Most of the people talking about fairness and bantering back and forth in this debate just voted to pay are going to pay 17 grand to a company to find someone to work for us. I mean, so it's this kind of, the whole conversation is silly. If we're talking about $16,000 and big, back and forth, I just think the whole thing is kind of silly, and it's unfortunate.
Mr. Guevara?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree in part with Mr. Sweeney in that, had we known the size of the deficit that we're facing in the next fiscal year when we were bargaining, I think the outcome would have been different. I think the staff would have bargained differently. I think the votes would have been different. This has the unfortunate accident of coming after we're aware of what that's going to mean, and we're going to be asking the department heads to ask people to retire early at some point, probably, depending on what happens with that resolution. We're going to be asking them to have people work fewer hours. We're going to be asking them to lay people off. Again, it sounds like, based on the earlier presentation, that they might just blame us for the layoffs and the furloughs, because apparently department heads can't be held responsible for the 70 people that are making over more money than the department heads are. But I do think that they should have some credibility here and ownership of it.
Let me say, I think Mr. Webster will come back to those that have already spoke once.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah. What we're proposing there for the early retirements and so forth, there is potentially a huge gain there. What we're looking at here, though, is such a trivial thing in the grand scheme of things. I don't want to minimize the $16,000 by any means, but that's half the cost of a pickup truck that we buy for the county highway department. And, you're talking about these positions here, and John's talking about fairness, and he's absolutely right about that as well. And so, if this was $160,000 or $260,000 or something, yeah, I could understand it. But as John said, I think it's pretty silly to not equalize things for everyone there, and that $16,000 would do it.
Okay, Mr. Schultz, Mr. Westcott, and then we'll go back to those that have spoken once.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just an observation that as we deal with the bargaining units, they are in a radically different position. As we have the conversation with our state's attorney office, the threat that always hangs over us is that we're going to be compared with McHenry County if it goes to arbitration, if that's the right term, and we're going to lose. And so we're always staring in the face that specter of, if we don't accept what they've given to us, we have a high likelihood of losing in arbitration, and then we're going to pay a whole lot more money. The difference between that and the non-marketing units means that we do actually have a choice what we do in regard to the raises for those people. And I would suggest that our previous history of often coupling whatever happens with the bargaining units with what we then do with the non-bargaining units needs to be decoupled. And I'm going to be in support of that in the future. And this is a step in the direction of the decoupling of what we do under sometimes duress as it relates to the bargaining process versus where we actually have a choice.
Mr. Westcott? Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I got to get the first ones first.
I don't have a problem with the freeze. I have a problem with the amount of money going to the other two offices and not including the coroner's office in that, which that organization works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and does nothing but good for this community. And I'm opposed. If they're going to do a split, add the coroners in that. Thank you.
Okay, anyone that hasn't spoken to it? Okay, who wants to speak again? Mr. Hoffman, and Mrs. Gorel, and Mr. Jury. Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Chairman. To my esteemed colleague, I agree it sounds fair, but to me the process has never been fair. Because first of all, you start out with somebody gets elected, they may or may not have the skills needed to do the job, and they get paid a higher salary than a worker in a regular position in the county that may have all the skills in the world. The second thing is, I'm really opposed to giving somebody a 3% raise or even a 1% raise that has never done that particular position before. We do not, for instance, when I got promoted from assistant superintendent to superintendent detention, I did not get a 3% pay raise from the person that I replaced. I got paid according to what my level of experience was. So I don't see why somebody who's just coming in should automatically get any pay raise. So that's where I stand, and I disagree completely that it's political, because there's not one county board member that I know is up for an election with an opponent. So I do not see this as a political move. And as far as the money we save, I hope we're not saying that saving $16,000 isn't worth it. When we're this far in debt, saving a penny is worth it. Thank you.
Laurel?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Chairman. When we did our collective bargaining, had we settled right up front, and didn't it take us 3 years to get it settled?
It did.
And if we had done it at the beginning, we would have saved ourselves a lot of money because of what they were asking wasn't that much. But as a board, we decided not to go ahead and honor what they were asking. Sometimes we need to look back, and I'm not a person who likes to look back. You can't, because it's done, it's over with, you can't change it. But we made a foolish mistake way back then that could have saved us lots of money, and yet everyone held out. This is very reasonable. And I do have to go along with Mr. Biondo, and I will go along with Mr. Biondo. What goes from here forward is one thing. We can't even compare ourselves with the collective bargaining we did before because we weren't the smartest in it. Thank you.
Mr. Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, yes, we've made mistakes, but we need to start correcting them. And I'm going to support the little old woman and the man out there that are living in their home, that haven't had a raise in 2 or 3 years, and their taxes went up, and I'm going to support them, and that's going to be fair. My phone's been ringing off the hook in support of what this resolution says. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to start to do the right thing. And right now, for those who are not on the Finance Committee, we're in some deep, I can't say it, I'll spell it, blank, 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 trouble with finances. And I'm starting now. I will vote no for Mr. Biondo's amendment. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion, Mr. Westcott?
Yes, is it proper for me to make an amendment to this amendment to
Sure.
split that 3 ways?
Sure.
That's my amendment.
So your amendment is specifically...
Split it with the coroner's office.
Okay.
Straight up 3 ways.
And seconded by Mr. Fiducia, and discussion now on the amended amendment. Mr. Biondo?
Actually, well, I mean, I'm not saying it's good or bad. All I'm saying is that it actually messes up. The auditor and recorder will not be at the level of the treasurer and the county clerk. That's the only difference.
Unless we get more from the county.
Yeah.
Chairman.
Yeah, unless we would take more from the chairman, I guess. I don't want to do that.
Okay. Further discussion? We're discussing the amendment to
Did he get a
include the
second?
coroner.
He got a second, right?
He got a second,
Okay.
yes. Okay. Let's see, so we'll vote on the amended amendment, which would be to include the coroner's office. All those in favor say aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion fails. Back to the original amendment. Now, further discussion. I do want to say one thing at this point. The elected officials, along with these department heads, sometimes I think we lose sight of that we've cut $22 million from this budget from '08. These were the folks that led the charge. I mean, they did that. We ordered it up, we said, this is what we need. We cut their budgets, they went about the business and got it done. So there's an inherent unfairness to all of this because we've got to set them for 4 years now, not knowing what the future is. And our bargaining, a lot of that delay, Angie, was due to the bargaining unit itself. We had so many people, Mr. Krolinkus can probably write textbooks on that whole issue. But having said all that, we do have to appreciate what's going on here. Some of these positions haven't gotten anything for 8 years, so there is definitely a fairness issue. I'm well aware of what's coming. We're going to be at a freeze, I can tell you. The minute that we pass this thing on the early retirement, there'll be a countywide freeze, all non-bargaining. We're going to have to look at probably furloughs, you name it. There's going to be a lot of things. By the way, we've been through this before, okay? But that's what we're going to be dealing with. So it's as good a time as any to announce that next Thursday, rather than finance meeting, we'd like to have a special county board meeting in this room again next Thursday at 5:30 to discuss this whole issue, both the 16 and the 17 budgets. So with that, the motion on the floor is to reduce chairman's pay and to split that with the 2 offices. Clerk will call the roll.
Goral? Guevara? No. Hoffman? No. Jury?
No.
Kelly? McDonald? Nicolosi? Salgado? Schultz? Sweeney? Tassoni? Webster? Westcott? Biondo? Boomer? Fiducia? Earl? Eight yes, 9 no, 3 absent.
Okay, the motion fails then. Now we have the main motion before you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is approved. Mr. Jerry?
Thank you. We have next resolution is a resolution authorizing the chairman of the county board to execute an intergovernmental agreement providing a resolution.
Can't hear you.
Gary.
Mr. Jerry?
I'm sorry.
For maintenance and operation of certain municipal county authority parking, and I move for its adoption.
We have a motion, seconded by Mrs. Goral. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Resolution is approved. Okay. Those were Mr. Schultz and Mr. Westcott? Mr. Guevara, okay. Mr. Jerry, that motion is approved, so proceed.
Thank you. Next resolution authorizing the chairman of the Winnebago County Board to execute an interlocal agreement for use of municipal parking spaces, and I move for its adoption.
The motion seconded by Mr. Hoffman. Any discussion? Mr. Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we just get an overview of where we find ourselves in relation to all the property that we purchased and the bonding that we did, the $4 million to buy parking spaces or land that we could turn into parking spaces, and how that relates to this transaction that we're now engaged in with the parking ramp?
We can do that. We can have that in a subsequent meeting. Wouldn't be able to do that this evening. What I can tell you is this is some housekeeping with the one between the city and the BMO Harris Center. The implication as far as dollars is nil, but this is specifically in the use of the BMO Harris deck.
Just trying to understand if, on a net basis, we've now got a surplus of parking because of the previous actions that we've taken, and that puts us in that position, or if this is, now we're breaking even. You know, I just don't understand how it fits in a comprehensive strategy as it relates to parking.
Well, we spent a lot of time on that. We can certainly give you a report on all of that.
You spent a lot of time at this county board?
We spent a lot of time on this in general, believe me,
Well, but
including
at
the county board.
On the county
But,
board floor?
All you had to be down here at any time today, and you'll know there's not an abundance of parking. That's for sure.
Well,
This deck now, they're not going to have done till October, so, but we've taken that all into account, so we'll be glad to share that with you.
But the fact is that this matter is before us for a vote, and I don't have the information I need, and I'm asking for that information, and you're saying it will be covered at a future meeting.
We're not voting on the entire parking arena down here. We're voting on this deck. And basically, the bottom line was, our original resolution that we passed allowed for an out clause that they can't do to bond it, the city. So that's really what all this amounts to. And it allows the BMO Harris to use our admin lot and 2 others, which they had been right along, and we just never had an agreement. That's the extent of that. We'll be glad to inform you as to the rest of it.
Are we going to have excess parking capacity based on the other properties we've purchased?
We will have probably at Excelsior at that point. But from where we're at right now, this will take care of it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mm-hmm. Anything else, Mr. Chapman, you want to add to that? Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Well, Mr. Schultz is a no. Okay. The motion is approved. So, Mr. Jerry.
Thank you. Next resolution is approving authorization execution of a real estate contract for sale of real estate commonly known as Chestnut Street, Rockford, Illinois, and I also move for its adoption.
We have the motion, seconded by Mr. Gurl and Mrs. Gurl. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Resolution is approved. Mr. Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next resolution we have is a resolution requiring quarterly software compliance report made to the Operation and Administrative Committee, and I move for its adoption.
Heard the motion, seconded by Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Jury, or Mr. I should say, Mr. Guevara, Mr. Nicolosi. Did I miss anybody? Mr. McDonald? Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution's approved. Mr. Jury?
Thank you. The next resolution, we have a resolution respecting the position of Chief Information Officer, and I move for its adoption.
The motion, seconded by Mr. Guevara. Any discussion? Mr. Kelly?
These next resolutions, I know, are in response to the controversy we recently had with Microsoft. My concern is these just arose very recently, and I haven't really had a chance to dig in, think about all the possible ramifications and repercussions of these. And I'm concerned that these next resolutions may not even really address what was the cause of the problem, because what I understand the cause of the problem with Microsoft was that departments were ordering software without the IT department's involvement. And I don't see where these resolutions really address that. So for that reason, I would move to lay over this resolution and the resolutions H through K.
You've heard the motion. H is, I think, already off the agenda, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so it'll be I, J, and K. Motion was moved by Mr. Kelly, seconded by Mr. Schultz, Mr. Salgado, and Mrs. Laurel. Discussion on the layover. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Those resolutions will lay over. Mr. Jury?
Concludes our report.
Thank you. Public Works Committee, Mr. Kelly.
No report.
Thank you. Public Safety Committee, Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Public Safety has one resolution this evening. That resolution is authorizing an execution of an intergovernmental cooperation agreement for police services with the Village of McChesney Park, and I so move.
Heard the motion, seconded by Mr. Salgado. Any discussion? Mr. Guevara?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. On the agenda, does economic development precede public safety?
I don't see economic development on here.
I have no report for
You have
economic
no
development.
report? Okay. Okay, good catch there, fellow, okay.
Fred, when they call me, I just come.
All right, skip the page. Yeah, that's one, it's right there, right? We already knew it.
Why me?
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, resolution is approved. Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now what we've all been waiting for. We've had 1,800 bookings this month with an average jail population of 719. Animal Service had 1,088 calls for service. There were 41 dogs adopted, 44 cats, and 1 rabbit. Rescued were 8 dogs, 21 cats, and 1 snake. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Economic Development, Mr. Westcott, for the record.
We have no report.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to unfinished business. I do want to also announce another, from an advisory standpoint relative to this whole issue of the finance director, so I've asked both Mr. Biondo, Mr. Jury, Mr. Hoffman, and Mr. Sweeney to serve on that. We're going to be going through the job description. Staff will be Mr. Chapman, Mr. Cutler, I think also Kim Ponder, and maybe some others for input, but, and that'll start as soon as we can get that person in and start the interview process, so. Any other unfinished business? We have a reappointment of Tanaya Reedy into the unexpired term of Phyllis Spice for the Winnebago County Housing Authority, and that is for a first reading, I believe. Is it not? Okay. And also Northwest Fire Protection District, Dan McCurgan, they'll be read in for a first reading. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Pardon? Mr. Chapman?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the appointment for the Housing Authority is under unfinished business, so.
That's already laid over?
I believe so, yes.
I'll entertain a motion then to approve Mrs. Biedry. Moved by Mr. Hoffman, second by Mr. Guevara, Mr. Gurl, Mr. Salgado, Mr. Jury. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? She will be appointed. So with that, under new business, Dan McCurkin, and that will lay over. Now, Mr. Guevara, your motion. Seconded by Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Jury. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.